Welcome to Audio Story House. Subscribe to listen to more stories. Emma clenched her fists tightly, struggling against Oscar's affections. Oscar tried to kiss her, but she turned her head away, trying to avoid his breath on her face. Oscar's expression turned displeased, and with anger in his voice, he said, "You should think about your parents' company." Those words pierced Emma's heart like a thorn. After a moment of silence, Emma slowly picked up a scarf from beside the bed and blindfolded herself. Seeing this, Oscar's face showed a satisfied smile, and he whispered, "Good girl." Oscar had said that Emma's eyes were the least like those of his first love. Emma's parents sold her to Oscar, the son of the richest man in H City, for $500,000 to save their company from bankruptcy. Emma's parents were incapable of running the company, leading her grandfather's once thriving business into decline. Raised by her grandfather, Emma didn't want to see his company go bankrupt, so she agreed to this business marriage. At a young age, Oscar inherited his parents' company and, with his keen business acumen, kept the company growing. There was no wedding ceremony for this marriage. Emma always wondered why Oscar married her. It became clear when she moved into Oscar's house. She resembled his first love, Heidi, who was currently in France, by about 80%. Heidi, elegant and a ballet dancer, had a tall, graceful figure. Emma, on the other hand, was a classical dancer. Oscar said he hated looking into her eyes during their intimate moments because they reminded him least of Heidi. This life continued for 2 months. One day, Emma walked into the living room and saw Heidi sitting on the sofa. Emma recognized her immediately from the photos. Not only was Heidi Oscar's first love, but she was also the daughter of the H family. Heidi played with a set of keys, clearly able to come and go from this house as she pleased. Seeing Emma, Heidi's eyes flickered with surprise, then amusement. Heidi smiled and said, "You really do look like me." She smiled faintly and said, "Do I?" Heidi continued, "Your marriage to Oscar was just a bet he made with me. He wondered if I would come back to marry him when I heard he was getting married." And indeed, he did get married. Heidi suddenly warned Emma, "Stay away from Oscar. Don't even dream of falling for him. So that's it. I'm just a pawn in your game. Then you better try hard to make him divorce me. I'd welcome it." For the first time, Emma meant it. With Heidi back, Oscar might soon choose to divorce her, as she was just a substitute. "Let's wait and see," Heidi said coldly, then turned and left. This marriage was painful for everyone involved. Emma's loved one, Zack, a simple customer service manager, suffered for his inability to help her. Before marrying Oscar, Emma's parents had approached Zack, saying that if he couldn't produce $500,000, Emma could marry him. Emma begged her parents not to separate them, only to be met with 2 slaps and their words, "What right do you have to talk to us?" Emma, brought home and raised by her grandfather, felt little affection for her parents. Her grandparents doted on her like a princess, making her parents dislike her even more. They preferred her brother William, who was lazy and liked to gamble. Her parents never scolded him. After marrying Oscar, they lived in separate rooms, and he only visited Emma's room when he was in a bad mood. Maybe with Heidi's return, Oscar was in a good mood. He hadn't been to her room recently. That night, as Emma was preparing to rest, her phone suddenly vibrated with an urgent message from a friend. She opened it, and her expression instantly froze. Zack had been detained by the police for drunk driving and hitting someone. Early the next morning, Emma hurriedly found a reputable lawyer and, accompanied by him, went to the police detention center. When Zack was brought into the meeting room, he looked exceptionally tired and anxious. His eyes conveyed deep helplessness and fear. Emma quickly approached him, asking eagerly, "Zack, what happened? How could you be accused of drunk driving and hitting someone?" Zack took a deep breath. "Emma, I've been framed. That night, I was just catching up with some old friends, and I'm sure I didn't drink. But on my way home, I suddenly felt dizzy and then lost consciousness. When I woke up, I found myself at an accident scene, and the police told me I had hit someone while drunk driving. Emma's brows furrowed, and she felt a chill. Have you thought about who might do this to you? Zack was silent for a while, then said softly, I know things were going well at work. As Zack described the events of that day, the lawyer pondered for a moment and then whispered to Emma, this doesn't look simple. Zack might have offended some powerful people. This is a typical framing tactic they use. Under such circumstances, a legal battle seemed hopeless. Perhaps if Emma pleaded with someone wealthy and powerful, there might be a glimmer of hope. Oscar appeared in Emma's mind. She hurried into Oscar's study, the first time she had ever sought him out on her own. Oscar sat in his large office chair, looking emotionlessly at her. Oscar, can you do me a favor? Emma explained the situation and begged Oscar for help. Oscar gently set down the document in his hand. Why should I help you? His tone was cold and direct. Emma bit her lip, knowing she had to offer something that could persuade Oscar. Tell me what you want. I'll do anything if you can save Zack. A sly glint appeared in Oscar's eyes. You know Heidi has no interest in having children. But I want a child. If you agree to bear my child, I will let you go and help your friend. Emma hesitated. If I agree, will you ensure Zack's safety? Oscar nodded. I promise. Under Oscar's gaze, Emma slowly walked towards him, her hands gently wrapping around his waist. Her eyes were complex but determined. She gently kissed Oscar's lips, a kiss filled with helplessness and resolve. Oscar quickly responded to her kiss, tearing at her clothes and kissing her neck downwards. Do I need to get a scarf? Emma remembered how they used to blindfold her eyes during their intimate moments. No need. Over the next few days, Emma spent every night anxiously checking if she was pregnant, and during the day, she followed up on the case at the lawyer's office. In the evening, after leaving the law firm with a heavy heart, Emma returned home. As she stood at her front door, a familiar figure appeared in her sight, Heidi. Heidi looked somewhat haggard. Upon seeing Emma, Heidi stepped forward with a cold tone. Emma, I warn you, divorce Oscar immediately. Otherwise, I'll make sure your boyfriend Zack stays in prison for life. She stared blankly at Heidi, suddenly connecting the dots. It was you framed Zack? Heidi's lips curled into a vicious smile. Yes, it was me. As long as you don't leave Oscar, Zack will never get out. Was this the game of the powerful? Heidi was a lunatic. Unable to handle her own man, she turned her spite on Emma. Each time Emma visited Zack, his condition worsened. He felt inadequate, incapable of giving Emma happiness. Zack had grown up in an orphanage and left at 16. To pay for his expensive tuition and living expenses, he started a grueling working life. By day, he studied hard. By night, he labored in various odd jobs. Emma, though having a brief period of happiness with her grandfather, was left to fend for herself after his passing. She worked for her tuition. That's how she met Zack. They encouraged each other, striving to survive. Sitting across Zack, Emma asked softly, Zack, are you okay? He shook his head, his voice low. Emma, I feel like I can't hold on much longer. She reached out, tightly holding Zack's hand, trying to comfort him. Remember the day we went hiking? The sun, the green grass, your laughter. Zack closed his eyes, savoring those memories. Yeah, it was beautiful. I remember you shouting out your dreams on top of that mountain. Back then, though their days were tough, they had moments of relaxation like any other couple, hoping for a better future. Could they have ever imagined this future? Emma knew none of this was Zack's fault. They were just unfortunate to cross paths with two mad people with power. As mere puppets in the hands of these influential madmen, Emma and Zack had no defense. That evening, Emma received a text from the lawyer. Zack committed suicide. Her world collapsed in an instant. Her hands trembled, and the phone slipped from her grasp, hitting the ground with a dull thud. Everything spun around her, the world blurring. Her legs gave way, and she slowly collapsed to the ground, consciousness fading. When Emma woke up, she was in the hospital. Oscar sat beside her, looking at some documents. Seeing her awake, he chided, "Why didn't you tell me you were pregnant?" "Pregnant?" Emma found it absurd. What did it matter now? "Don't worry, the fetus is fine. The doctor said you're just exhausted. Rest for a few days." Emma didn't care about the fetus. It was initially a bargaining chip, now a burden. She looked around. It was a private room. Oscar had really taken care. "I honestly didn't know Heidi was behind Zack's situation. If I had known from the start, I would have stopped it," Oscar apologized. "Zack, I'll find a grave for him." Emma found it ironic. Zack spent his life trying to make a place for himself in the world, only to leave behind a grave. "No need, let's do a sea burial. He doesn't need a gravestone, no one will remember him. Take care of yourself, don't think about anything else," Oscar said, patting Emma's shoulder before leaving the hospital room. How could she not think about it? Her love was gone. Tears filled her eyes. Just then, the woman Emma would hate for the rest of her life appeared. The door suddenly opened, and Heidi stood at the entrance. Despite being well-dressed, her red, angry, and tired eyes couldn't be hidden. Upon entering, Heidi erupted, "Emma, you have no shame. You even got pregnant?" Her voice was sharp and full of rage. Emma slowly sat up, weak but resolute and disdainful in her gaze. "Heidi, you can't keep Oscar, so you manipulate me and Zack. How pathetic you are." Infuriated, Heidi lunged at Emma, attempting to grab her. Emma, reacting quickly and with all her strength, slapped Heidi sharply across the face. Heidi was stunned, a bright red handprint on her cheek. The altercation intensified. During a scuffle, Emma lost her balance and fell hard to the floor, blood flowing from beneath her. Lying in pain, Emma still sneered at Heidi, "Look at you two, a perfect pair of vile lovers. Oscar forced me to bear his child knowing you don't want to, and you, in your desperation for Oscar, threatened me." Heidi stood frozen, her face a mix of shock and confusion. Emma, despite her agony, felt a twisted joy. She laughed mockingly, her laughter filled with irony, as if to ridicule the absurdity of it all. Nurses and doctors, hearing the commotion, rushed in to tend to Emma's injuries, while Heidi was escorted out of the room. After the miscarriage, Oscar spent as much time as possible in the hospital room, caring for her. Whether out of guilt or because he was her legal husband, Oscar made sure she ate, even when she had no appetite. Emma had few friends, spending most of her time working, so no friends visited her. Unexpectedly, her parents came. Her father entered slowly, looking disapprovingly at Emma in the bed. "How could you be so careless? Getting pregnant and then losing it. How will you stand in Oscar's house now?" Her mother followed, her tone tinged with blame. "You've been married to Oscar for so long, and you haven't even given your brother $50,000? Facing her parents' reproach, Emma remained silent, her eyes reflecting fatigue and powerlessness. Her mother continued, "You're really not grateful. Who married you into a wealthy family, giving you a good life?" These words pierced Emma like needles. Since Zack's death, Emma's hope had vanished. Her life felt like a kite cut from its string, aimlessly drifting. Lonely and heartbroken, her life and marriage seemed to others merely transactions and opportunities. Time seemed to fast forward in Emma's life, with one tragedy after another. Her condition worsened. Oscar tried various ways to rekindle her zest for life, but Emma seemed indifferent to everything, her heart void of emotion. Emma's mind drifted back to her childhood, to the happier times with her grandfather, a kind and gentle old man. One of her fondest memories was of her grandfather buying her cotton candy. Each time she bit into the soft, sweet treat, she felt a sweetness in her heart. In her sleep, Emma suddenly opened her eyes. It was as if she saw her grandfather's figure appearing at the doorway of the hospital room. She heard his warm voice calling her, "Emma, I've come to take you for some cotton candy." After speaking, her grandfather turned and walked away. Emma followed, reaching out and holding his hand. She felt a long-missed warmth. At that moment, the heart monitor emitted a steady beep. Emma's face bore a happy smile as she went to meet her heaven, a place free of pain.